Good evening. This is the April 10, 2019 meeting of the Finance Committee. Just after 7 o'clock, we had a little hold-up to get some people in place here. Our agenda tonight, we have some transfers to take care of. Our last operating budget, Youth Commission. We have some folks here from the Youth Commission. Great to see them. We're going to vote on the CIP budget, which we pretty much have gone through already. And then we'll get into the town meeting warrant articles. I'm not sure if we have minutes tonight. I don't think we do, and then we'll adjourn. So let's start with the transfers, and we'll move from there. Okay, our first transfer tonight, this is in the assessor's office. Amount requested $100 to miscellaneous supplies. This is from the abstracts account. This will clear the account now, and this is to purchase town logo shirts for the assistant assessor. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Thanks, Ann.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Next transfer. This is under the manager, the town manager. Amount requested $3,000. This is going to professional services. This is to cover Faith Ave appraisal and other miscellaneous costs for the remainder of the fiscal year. And this is coming from the ICMA annual conference. That'll clear that account out. We're lucky to have a town manager here. Julie, good to see you. Just quick information on what this is relating to.
Certainly. Good evening, everybody. Through the chair, the Faith Ave issue, if you may recall, leads back to a planning board recommendation and an article that was passed by town meeting to enable us to file legislation to basically have a land swap between land the town owns and land that Diamond owns on Faith Ave. We recommended it because it will technically create a shorter roadway, which would be less expensive for maintenance purposes. For fire and police purposes, they felt it was a safer layout to go with the new layout. That legislation was passed with the legislature. The governor signed the bill on the last day of December 31st, so it was signed into law. The Senate and House both made amendments to the bill that, first of all, require us to follow Chapter 30B, which often, not necessarily would you normally have to do that. That's a bidding process because that's why you have special legislation, but they wanted the town to follow Chapter 30B, which means that you have to put in the central register what the value of the land is before you actually enact the transfer. In order to get the value of the land, you have to do an appraisal. So we've received a couple of bids. We think it may actually come in a speck lower than this, but we're really not sure. So right now, we're looking at potentially $2,000. We just got the description of the land last week. That could change the bid higher because if it's a larger piece of land, it increases the cost of the market rate appraisal. So that's what it's for. We hope we should be able to come in a little bit less than that, but we have to get this done because now that it is law, we're required to move forward on this.
Any other questions or comments?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next transfer, this is under treasurer. Requested $464.51. This is going to the ban interest LED lights, street lights. Just to cover short-term interest for the $82,049 State House note, Ed? This is coming from the clerical account. There was about $14,500 in this. Any comments on this, Ed? Is just...
Sure. We weren't sure because we're getting some offsets, some credits, some incentives as a result of doing this project. We didn't know whether those, at the time, did not know whether those incentives were going to be granted up front or at the completion of the project. It was determined at the completion of the project, therefore we needed, from a cash flow perspective, we needed the money to pay before we got the reimbursement or the grant. So we went out in March for a short-term note through June 30th. At the time we put the budget together for FY19, this was not known. It's small dollars, so that's why we're bringing it to you now.
And there's availability in the clerical account.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next transfer, this will be our fourth one, Kim. Transfer request also under treasurer, $750. This is going to conference/meetings. Also from the clerical account, this is to cover costs of the Mass Municipal Accountants Annual Conference. Any comments or questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Under general services, amount requested $3,000 to the electricity account. I kind of had a question on this. This is coming from water, sewer, heating. The reason for the transfer is miscellaneous janitorial supplies through June. So somehow that falls under electricity, or?
It's not electricity. That account description is not correct. I think that's janitorial supplies. Okay, just take a look. Or general services supplies. It's a regular supply account under general services, not electricity.
That's fine. Like I said, that's coming from the water, sewer, heating, which has a present balance of almost $20,000. I assume that's, seems to be adequate for rest of the year, Ed? We got room?
Yes.
That's good to hear, too. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you. We have a reserve account transfer. This would be under veterans medical relief. Amount requested $10,500. Present balance is less than that. Projected need to cover benefits under Chapter 115 for current active veterans. Any questions on this?
Question?
Ian?
How, will this take us to the end of the year, or do you anticipate another transfer?
So based upon our current caseload, provided we don't take any additional eligible veterans on between now and the end of the year, this is adequate enough to get us through. But that's an unknown, so we're just going with active
Right.
claimants right now. But certainly if it changes, and it could work the other way, someone could fall off. But knowing that you weren't going to meet for a period of time, and we have a payment coming up for next month, we had to prepare a transfer in anticipation of those payments.
Thank you.
Did everyone hear that? We're not going to meet for a period of time after tonight, so holding you to that.
I said you may not be.
Will not, bad.
Ed, what's the balance in the reserve account?
Hold on one second. I thought I brought it, 205,000 as of this morning.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. And Ed, that 205 is before these requested transfers, there's two more coming? Okay. Next transfer, also reserve account transfer under the Executive Office of the Town Manager, under salary, amount requested $1,680. This is a contractual obligation for performance evaluation of the Town Manager. Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. And our last transfer, and not least by any stretch, also reserve account transfer. This is under negotiator, amount requested $30,000. That present account available is basically zero. Funds needed to pay for January invoice and provide additional amount for the remainder of the fiscal year. Any questions or comments on this? Kim?
Eddie, how much have we already expended on negotiator?
I apologize, I ran a status report, I left it downstairs. I believe 35,000 was the original appropriation. Let me just look at the budget book. We brought in a transfer of 15, so that brought it to 50. We currently have about $180 left. So this would put it up at $80,000 with this transfer.
Through the chair, if I may, the
Sure.
majority of this is an ongoing arbitration. Back when we had the budget, we had no way of knowing how long the arbitration case was going to take. It's out of our hands once it goes to the arbitrator. So that's been the cost driver, has been that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Good. Great, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Youth Commission operating budget, and we have a team here. Some of us are in better moving shape than others. Norm, I'm not going to ask. Thanks for coming in, we do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us. I just have a brief presentation. I believe Sally brought a few of them up for you. You can follow along as we go along. It's where the status is for the Auburn Youth Commission with Auburn Youth and Family Services and how we'd like to address what our budget problems are.
Absolutely. And just before you start, the town manager recommendation for Youth Commission is $120,000 even, which is flat funded versus prior year. The request from the department from the Youth Commission is $125,000. So with that, Norm,
Okay.
it's all yours.
All right. And I apologize if I blow up this computer while we're here, but we should be all set. All right. What the first one goes with, we have is a breakdown of where the monies are, where they come from, and the actual, some of the services that are provided. They have 4 full-time staff members with minimal benefits and no retirement. 4 to 7 graduate school interns that come and help. Food pantry, a clothing closet, triage services, some fun programs, Wednesday for women, holiday giving program, coordination, and the Auburn Youth and Family Services serves 2,837 total clients that come in from the town, which represents 17% of the population of the town of Auburn. Under the contract that we have with Auburn Youth and Family Services, we ask them to maintain the building, maintain professional staff, routine meetings with the Auburn Police Department. We have 150 hours of in-school counseling at Auburn Middle School, 350 hours of in-school counseling at the Auburn High School, 100 general purpose hours for children grades 3 to 12 on-site or at the schools or at Auburn Youth and Family Services. 6 Auburn Middle School student slots and fun club after-school care for 5 days a week. Care substance abuse program at Swiss. Annual client survey that they send out to see where the services are and what they provide. Monthly and annual metrics reporting on services provided. A self-esteem focused lunch buddy program at Auburn Middle School. And peer relation group middle school feelings lasting 8 one-hour sessions. Those are things that are contracted with that, through Auburn Youth Commission. All right. On the third page of it, you'll sit there and you'll see the increase over what we have. It's broken up into Auburn High School counseling, Auburn Middle School counseling, the middle school feelings, and then the general counseling for the grades 3 to 12. And if you look at with the color charts, these are over the last 5 years as far as what the costs are or the number of hours that are actually provided. But it's always been an increase in need. The 16 to 18 hours were restricted despite increased need, while still many more hours are required in the contract that were provided. Staff availability was limited, and children can be therefore waitlisted, because if you don't have the staff there to take care of whatever the problem is, then obviously they have to be put on a wait to the next available person that can come in and take care of what their problem is. All right. More students served and higher frequency of required meetings between the Auburn Youth and Family Services staff and the Auburn Police Department and the Auburn Public Schools. They have a grant for the building requires that at least 51% of the services must be provided to low-income families. Additional counseling hours needed resulted in more oversight required by the clinical and executive directors, because all of their staff, when they're setting up programs, they actually have to be reviewed by a licensed clinician, and they actually have to be supervised by them too, because they don't have the licenses and the proper degrees to be able to do it without that additional supervision. Additional counseling hours needed results in more oversight required by also by the directors. This detracts from the clinical director being able to perform billable work. Additional fund club slots used but were unfunded. Where we only contract for 6, we actually provide 8, and they are unfunded. Alternative is to have a minor at-risk child alone every day for several hours after school. Auburn Youth and Family Services absorbs that cost also. Additional considerations we have: more students served result in higher frequency of required meetings. Well, that was the last one. All right, but there are some new ones that are in this one here. All right. What we do is, why should the services come from Auburn Youth and Family Services as opposed to the Auburn Public Schools? All right, it's a continuity. When you have somebody that has a severe problem, you want to be able to handle it, and it isn't something that can be handled within school hours. It's maybe something that is required through private counseling later on at Auburn Youth and Family Services. It could involve the family members, not just the student. It could involve all type of wraparound services that may be needed. Anonymity, and I actually said that right, which scared me. So, all right. Some kids, when you're in a school, you're there with all your friends. You're there with other people that, whatever, may not be aware of what the problems are that are going on. And if you're going into a counseling, it definitely has an effect on that child going in there knowing that they're going there. Now, when they go off to Auburn Youth and Family Services, they have that privacy knowing that it's just between them and their counselor and whoever they're dealing with. And what is the complexity, level of complexity? Auburn guidance counselors, they can handle in-school problems, and they do handle some of the other ones, but what they're doing is trying to guide them through the educational process and what they need. But if there's a more complex problem, whether it be drugs or family problems, you see higher rates of suicide, there could be other things going on. These are different things that need to be handled at a much higher level with somebody that's licensed to handle what those problems are. Environmental needs. All right, why is this, again, between the Auburn Public Schools and Auburn Youth and Family Service? Ability to engage the child's family, address contributing factors outside of the purview of the Auburn Public Schools. It's integrative as opposed to standalone approach. Auburn Public Schools guidance workload, while guidance staff increase has been approved by the committee, the sheer volume of cases, particularly those requiring intervention with the family, has also increased significantly. Need for wraparound services for children and their families has also increased. All right. We're currently funded at $120,000, but the actual cost to Auburn Youth and Family Services, just providing the services required in the contract, not including any overages, which they do because they're not going to turn anybody away. So they'll go with the contracted services. But the cost of that is $182,000 a year. We're currently funding at $120,000. Rates based on $15 an hour services rendered in counseling, management, and administrative capacity. Market value starts at $20. So the town of Auburn is actually receiving this at approximately a 25% discount, just with the cost of what they're doing. Market value of Auburn Youth, the Auburn Youth Commission contract would be about over $242,000. And we have been level funded for the past 3 years. Auburn Youth and Family Services has attempted to close the gap with fundraising, which inhibits organization from hiring and retaining new staff. What they're doing is the cost of what our contract provides to them is far exceeded. So what they're doing is, with all their fundraising and any other income that comes into it, they're using that to supplement the services that they are providing to us from the contract, and that does detract from other needs that they have. Services provided and the level of need continues to far exceed the requirements of our contract. I don't know why, though. All right. I know we talked about $120,000. We did meet with Julie and Ed, and due to a missed opportunity at the end of the year, I did not submit a request, but I did meet with Julie and Ed, and we did talk that we were talking about at least an increase up to $130,000. And we wanted to do that to, again, address the growing need of what the services are. If we go over it, and if we had not been level funded and we'd actually just gotten a 2% increase over the last 3 or 4 years, we still would have been just under $130,000, just with getting a 2% increase. So even though the $130,000 request is a little over an 8% increase, we think it is justified just by what they do and what the services are provided and at the cost of those services. The fall 2019 request, if we have a special meeting in the fall, which we usually do, will be to completely close the 62,000 gap of base hours. The gap currently closed solely by fundraising, leveraging fundraising income to cover Auburn Youth Commission contract removes ability to hire much-needed additional professional staff at $45,000 a year plus benefits. Contract requires that we maintain professional staff. Financial constraints severely limit the ability to hire new and retain current staff that they have. Increase in base hours required in 2020 and 2021 contract merited, but must be done so with corresponding proportional contract funding, minimum of additional 1.5 professional staff. We go through different things, and they have 4 people that are actually part of the staff. Sally's one of them, and then they have 1 clinical director, and then there are 2 other additional people that are actually employees at Auburn Youth and Family Services that also provide counseling services. The rest of it, the gap is covered by interns that they get anywhere from 4 to 7. Every year it fluctuates based on how many students will actually come in and actually help them out. All right, in summary, Auburn Youth and Family Services has served Auburn community unwaveringly, oh man, it's getting really bad, unwaveringly since 1978. As our community has grown, so have the needs of the town, and Auburn Youth and Family Service has continued to provide increased services across all areas to our residents. However, Auburn Youth Commission contract funding has not grown or kept up with the rate of an increase in services. Auburn Youth and Family Services continues to absorb the cost, but this is not sustainable. Needs of our families will continue to grow despite lack of contractual funding to support them. Without a substantial increase in contract funding, our children will go without services necessary to thrive in our schools and our community at large. Thank you for your support and your consideration. If you have any other questions, there is another thing that I would like to add to it, and that's what we're doing by having their staff provide the services that they're doing. All right. They basically provided between in school and at Auburn Youth and Family Services 12,133 hours. And the actual provided, those were the actual hours. The hourly rate for these counselors that were paid for that, providing those services is $9.72 an hour. You can go to McDonald's at minimum wage and make more than what you would be making to help our children and families in need. I mean, that's where we stand with the Auburn Youth Commission, trying to help, get a contract in place that provides services that are needed in our town, that has gone out there on a continuous basis, and they have always stepped up over the last, since 1978. And they'll continue to do that. They don't turn people away. They'll take them in. They will provide these services, again, unwaveringly. You talk to Sally, she's so committed to not just the youth, but primarily to the youth, who's the people that she deals with for the most part, but to all of our residents. Families go in there on a continuous basis. A vast majority of these people, 100% of the people that are handled by our contract are Auburn residents. Their clinician will have to see some people outside because of the way the insurance billing and the way that stuff works. But a vast majority of those people are still Auburn residents that are there. And the clinician, she'll be there from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, working with people, working with families all day. So they're going to provide them. They're going to do these services. They're going to take care of us and do what we can. And that's why we're making this consideration to even bring it up to $130,000 for this town meeting, and we will address it further at the next town meeting if we can, to close that gap even further. I think it's something that we need to do. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Norm. I will open that up to questions or comments from the committee. Kev?
Just an initial question. You mentioned billing. Does Auburn Youth and Family bill the client's health insurance for any of these services? I know the public schools are allowed to bill back for some of those services.
Yes, all of, as far as I know, the clinician stuff goes through insurance. Sally could probably address that a little bit better than what I could.
It's limited. Our clinical director can bill insurances.
Okay. So do you get, is there a percentage or a dollar-wise? I mean, is there...
It pays for her wages, and she does all the supervisions of all the interns, handles all the crisis interventions, handle anytime we have to report to DCF or anything, so.
Okay. So just your clinical director is able to bill back their hours?
Our other clinicians that are in the schoolhouse are master level, unlicensed, working on their license. I had a couple interns that received their masters, and they stayed for a little while, but they left because, master level salary at UInc is $42,000 a year. I'm basically paying my master level clinicians about 26.
Okay. Kim?
Eddie, I see the department request in here is $125,000.
Yes, so we received an email back on, I'm trying to remember, January 11th for $125,000, which came from Norm.
Yes.
But it hadn't gone to the Youth Commission. So we couldn't recognize that request until such time the Youth Commission voted out a recommendation to give to town administration. That second vote, or that vote by the Youth Commission, took place on February 14th. At that point, the budget was already complete. So we recognized, because we didn't have anything, we recognized the 125 is the only request. The budget was already done. I think a presentation was about to be made to the Board of Selectmen their following meeting. So the budget process, the hearings, everything had been completed on our end. So that's why there's a discrepancy of $5,000.
And I can explain, we worked with Julie for a while, and we had a problem getting a quorum to have meetings. We had people that had moved out of town, we got new people, and we either didn't get a hold of them or they lost interest, but we finally do have a working committee, thanks to Julie's help. We have our 5 members now, and we are now having monthly meetings so that we can hopefully not fall behind the schedule that we did as we did before. So And that explains why that kind of happened.
So it's acknowledged here, I'll call it the real request, I don't care about the number in front of us, is $130,000 from the Youth Commission. More questions, Kevin, than Kim?
Just more of a statement. I think maybe there was some bad timing as far as this goes. I will say over the years since when I first started on this committee, it wasn't clear what the Youth Commission was. I mean, you're night and day from now making a presentation as to what your budget looks like and where the hours are spent, and I think you're headed in the right direction. Unfortunately, I think for this year, it's a tough one to increase because the public schools did come in with an increase, I think, of 2 positions for counseling. And I asked the superintendent specifically when she was here, how would that affect the Youth Commission hours in Auburn Youth and Family Services? And she was very supportive of Auburn Youth and Family Services, saying no, it was still, those hours were still needed. The support of Auburn Youth and Family Services was there. However, I don't think we'll know until next year, till we see how many hours of services are offered out between the public schools and Auburn Youth, and if any of the hours that were Auburn Youth are now covered by these new folks that are within the public schools hours that they weren't able to cover before. So I almost, in my perspective, I don't think we'll know until next year how much of an increase. And I wouldn't have a problem if you come back next year and say, no, we took on additional hours, there was no effect of it, and we have to come in at even a larger number. But for this year, where we've already approved or recommended the school department budget with 2 more clinical positions, to add another number at this point, I would have a tough time
Okay. I mean, my understanding, and I don't know, with the school where they're going, but I know a lot of the people that come to Auburn Youth and Family Services, they are all referred to the school because some of their problems may fall outside of what their purview is as far as the educational and maybe even counseling. I know they want an increase on that, but some of that is geared toward counseling, towards student issues and stuff like that, where Auburn Youth and Family Services, again, does those wraparounds services to provide all of the entire family the needs that they have. And the way the historical evidence has gone, this has always increased. There's a growing need at all levels, and not just in Auburn, but throughout the entire spectrum for kids especially in needs, whether it be with opioids or any other problems that they're dealing with. And these are things that are referred to Auburn Youth and Family Services to handle that with the people with.
And I saw that, and I spoke when the school was here, that I was fortunate enough to be on that strategic planning committee for the schools, and that social emotional well-being was in every facet of that plan was there. So I realize the need is there. I just don't know dollar amount wise. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're in a little bit of an odd, it's not where we have them come back mid-year for a transfer because we're engaging in a contract for that amount with Auburn Youth and Family, correct? Is that, can you just, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, and through the chair, I also, if I can, I just want to first of all say that Auburn Youth and Family Services does a fantastic job. I think we all would agree with that. And unfortunately, when we closed out the budget request on December 31st, we didn't have a request, so we had to go. So when the request came in 2 weeks later, again without the vote, we understood that they were seeking more, and then February 14th, the request came in for the 130, and at that point, our budget was already established at the level that we had when we closed out at December 31st, I think what you're referring to. But we did have a great meeting, and what we talked about were many things that Mr. Kennedy is talking about, is there an opportunity, and I know the board, the AYFS board agreed to look at that, and Dorothy also is on the school committee, so we did raise the fact that if the demand for these services is increasing significantly through the middle school and or the high school, and we all recognize those demands are going to increase, it's happening across the country. Are there opportunities that the school department has to apply for grants that we're not eligible for as a town, nor potentially they're not eligible for as a 501c3? Are there funds available through the school department to help cover some of the costs of the guidance issues that are out there? Are there any programs possible? So, and I don't know the answer to that. That would be on the school level, and we also agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, I'm trying to address the committee. I'm not. At this point, guys have to bite the bullet and fully fund the base contract. We're not even dealing with the overtier. We've looked into grants since that meeting. We've tried to discuss just with Dr. Cornell as well. There are no funds out of that. We are still just swimming kids that need services, serious services that involve family, involve accidents. We can't even fund the base contract. I mean, the numbers that we put in there. Some of these requirements maybe for 100 hours, we're going to $500, and that's just for one of the 14 lines. So 2 full-time employees for a school, for someone that's going to be part of the school time, that is not going to close that gap, not by any stretch. Our kids deserve more than somebody who's going to be paid the equivalent of $9.72 an hour. I'm sorry. So whether it's a fall time, whether it's next year, we can't hear again and again, oh, more than 2% is too much to ask. At some point, there's going to have to be a lump sum jump, but we're going to hit critical mass. We can't keep staff. That's it. I mean, you were dealing with children with suicide ideation. What are you going to do? I'm sorry we didn't get a grant for that. Good luck. Go on the waiting list for Wiggins and Worcester to wait 3-4 months to see the commission. We can't do that. Our kids are going to, we need to do better.
Yeah, and then another part of that is we talk about continuity. If there's guidance services, counseling services prior to school, from June till September, those services aren't there. Now they're going to Auburn Youth to close that gap, or there's no services at all. And with historical evidence, if the counseling stops, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have, a fallback on what's going on with that person, whether it's a student or whatever. They can have a relapse or different stuff. So by having it going through Auburn Youth and Family Services, it's a continuous thing that goes year-round. And people can come in and take care of what their problems are and address those problems on a year-round basis, as opposed to through the school year. And that's not saying that's good or bad, it's just the reality of where some families are and where some instances are where it's something that is needed continually throughout the entire year.
Okay.
Through the chair, a question for the town manager and the CFO. So they provided a copy of the contract that they signed with the town of Auburn. When a contract is worded, because this one just says a flat contract fee of $120,000, could that be rephrased in a contract that would say a contract fee up to amount, for it to be funded for a lesser amount, but a fee or an agreement to reach a higher level, meaning that we could come back fall town meeting or a later time and allocate additional funds towards a contract that would have a maximum? Is that?
Well, when we had our meeting, it sounds like maybe there's a different approach now, but when we had our meeting, we talked about a long-term strategy to get AYFS to where they are, that every year we would increase them so that we're not faced with the need to take this giant jump. At that time, we weren't talking about 60,000, we were talking about 10,000. And we had committed that we would absolutely be moving forward on a long-term basis to do that. So as we do that, the contract would have to be amended or adjusted to whatever that dollar amount would be.
Excuse me.
So is town administration serious about looking at that now? Obviously, we've done this on every few years that we think that we're in a better spot, that kind of thing, which is a lousy way to do a budget, but it is a contract. It's not, doesn't come with a benefits expense of 30% around this. It's something we could clearly come to an agreement on a number every year if we had to on this.
I think going forward, is the town manager said, we would suggest a long-term plan. We recognize even at status quo, there's an inflationary factor that you need to keep up with. So that rate of growth needs to be programmed into the request or our recommendation. So we can tie that into a Northeast CPI index or something like that. Beyond that, I think we indicated that we would revisit this in the fall. Certainly, I think we, through your budget hearings, we have some mandated costs that we're not even addressing in this budget from the federal government that relate to stormwater management. That request was upwards of $300,000. That's not even programmed into this budget. So how we can ignore those costs and increase other operational budgets that are not mandated becomes problematic for town administration. So certainly, we know that the numbers are going to change. We are willing to revisit this in the fall if it means that some funds are available, and we amend it at the fall town meeting and amend the contract. That's very doable. we just can't commit to an amount right now without knowing what the number's going to be from the state, the final numbers on the local receipt side. We only have the governor's budget. We don't know what our new growth is going to be for the year. That may be greater than what we estimated. There are too many factors that are unknown at this point in time, but willing to revisit in the fall.
Which is our normal course of action. This is a preliminary budget. It gets us into a box. We move forward, and our box, knock on wood, usually grows a little bigger and takes care of some of these needs. What I would like, and I don't know if it's reasonable, that for the fall town meeting, that we have some sort of plan, a longer-term plan in place for Youth Commission. I understand what's being brought forward. By the way, 10 grand, kind of a drop in the bucket in terms of the big picture here. At 4% unemployment, there's a lot of great social professionals. They're starting to make some okay money, and they do great work. I just love to be able to keep them. It sounds like you just can't keep people at those rates, and let's not insult McDonald's there, Norm, come on. You know, they give you coffee sometimes, right? So can would we be able to look at a longer-term plan by the fall town meeting, or is that too soon to assume we'd have something more than, all right, we can increase, or we can't increase, and this is why?
To me,
I don't know if that's reasonable.
I think if this is, I have to say, that's the first time I saw the figure for 62,000. So last time we were talking, it was 10,000. So we were absolutely assuming, well, when we first met, I think it was 5,000. And then when we first got the request, it was 5, then it was 10. So that, as you said, is doable at a fall town meeting. We knew the budget was already established for now. If that amount is 60, we would have to look at what that, how do we get to that one-time 60? And then maybe you don't need a
I'm not even
long-term
talking
plan.
a
Maybe you just
specific
do it
number.
once.
Right.
And then you just do your annual CPI or index. If we can't get to the 60, then I think we need a long-term plan on how we are going to get to that, because that number is just going to continue to grow.
Sure. Okay.
So it all depends on what, as I said, we don't know what amounts, what funds we're going to have available at the fall, if we can address the entire thing, but I would also recommend that the commission go back and take a vote if that's indeed what, because we have to react to the commission votes.
Correct. So it is,
I'm somewhat confused. I really don't know what the request is. I still believe it's 130. I think for
It
presentation
is 130. We're going to address the bigger...
purposes, the number of hours above and beyond what is contractually committed to, that value is 60.
No.
So the reason that the initial request came to you just for 130,000 was actually, that was based on some older data. I mean, we actually feel back to very some of the data. 182 is the actual cost, what it took to do 2018. We were told last year that we did not make a request for spring sounding for a certain number, that we were then precluded from getting any funds in the fall sounding, even at last year's fall sounding, even though there were funds available. So while I understand that, and we actually tried to have another meeting with the youth commission, and we did not get a forum. We had a really hard time getting members, which you can imagine how frustrating that is when you have a budget ready to provide, and we just can't get members to come. So we wanted to at least not, we actually didn't want to blindside anybody by any type of request in the fall, or even when we were discussing raising the numbers that are included in that contract for 2020 and 2021.
And
we can get to show you this. So we would say the actual request, because it was only what the youth commission voted on, because we actually did 130. But if there's any way that that number can be given, then perhaps the commission committee suggested the modification of the contract. If there are any additional funds in the fall, that needs to start. And if it happens,
so I believe the normal course of action would be for the Youth Commission or representatives thereof reaching out officially to town administration in terms of what may be available or not available come fall town meeting. And I think we'll just be able to react to that. I think it'd be presumptuous of us to take action right now over and above what's been requested. Once again, fully well realizing the budget really doesn't get finalized till the fall anyways. So that's a course of action anyways. Kim?
The recommendation we have from the administration right now is 120.
Correct.
Not 130, 120.
Correct.
And that's what we're voting on tonight, correct?
We're voting on the 120. Obviously, we've got the power to recommend a different number tonight. Frankly, we all know it's a preliminary budget. We're usually in a better position in the fall, certainly in a smarter position, so I believe it would be presumptuous. I think the last time we did increase this, we were actually found out some numbers early. We did the adjustment. We increased it based on Norm with a great presentation. I remember that like yesterday. Fantastic job again. But we were able to raise it for the Maytown meeting. I don't see us in a position to do that tonight.
Okay.
That's one opinion, but certainly there's a lot more information that's come out tonight. It sounds like it's fairly new to town administration in multiple numbers running around. We're going to get our heads around this a little better and then maybe come up with a plan for fall town meeting or for next year, knowing we've got an issue here.
And I apologize to town management. When we had our meeting, these were numbers that we were aware of the actual cost, but we were actually looking at just $130,000 to close the gap a little. But we did have some numbers. I know we were there, and a lot of the reports weren't finished yet for the year, and Bill was there, and he couldn't provide a lot of those. These are based on further research after we had that initial meeting to find out what the actual cost was for the service, the contractual services that we're providing. And that's why we did this in the presentation, just to kind of make everybody aware of where the gap actually is and how much it's actually growing since we've actually started this.
Yep. Okay. I will caution, though, I know our budget schedule, and I'm not trying to defend town administration, that schedule hasn't changed. I've been on this board since the turn of the century. So in terms of the Youth Commission helping town administration come up with good numbers and good decisions.
That was definitely on me.
No, that's fine.
Because
it's tough getting
I was working
people on those
back and
boards.
forth, just trying to make sure we had enough
Right.
meeting members to have a quorum, and we went over a year without having that number. And people would go, and I'd call them, and they'd be moving out of town, or they were on the committee and they left.
Yep.
Now we have 5 people that are committed to being there and doing what we can, and they seem really enthusiastic about everything. So I feel good about moving forward with how we're going to operate as a commission and how we're going to follow what the guidelines are.
Great.
But that is the reason why we missed that deadline that we had.
I get that.
Nothing to do with them, all to do with me.
Okay, good. Any,
Mr. Chairman, just one other comment. Beyond the direct $120,000 that we contribute annually to Auburn Youth and Family Services, we also provide them our public building. We also provide capital improvements. So there are some additional costs above and beyond the 120 that we are, you can call it an indirect cost, not a direct cost, but it's a value. So I think, that goes a long way too. So, I mean, when you add those costs in to the 120, you're bumping probably up against, I mean, there's no rent there, so, you're probably talking upwards of $200,000 a year.
okay.
Through the chair, there are also supplementary services that are not included in whatever part of the contract.
I-
So I think you probably-
Correct. It's-
But we are very grateful for anything you get.
There's a lot going on with the budget and with the building, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, let's never forget that this is a fantastic safety net for the schools, as Dr. Brunel, as Kevin pointed out. Dr. Brunel was gushing about the help you guys provide and making their job a little bit easier, and even the police job a little easier, too, in terms of intervention. So absolutely appreciated. So let's try to resolve this anyways, at least for something a little better long-term. Like I said, we've been doing this on a couple of $1,000s here and there basis for a long time, and it isn't working that well anymore. I think we can be smarter with this. Any other questions or comments on this? We do have a request for $120,000. I will say that the department request, can we please call that a $130,000 request, even though we see 125 in front of us? but the town manager is recommending a $120,000 budget. Do we have a motion on that?
Motion to recommend.
Any other comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Great, thank you all.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for all your
Thank you all for your
consideration.
time.
Appreciate it.
This, I'm sure, isn't closed. Great, thanks again. Okay, with that, our next item is a vote on the CIP budget. I asked Ed if he could just give us a quick summary of what would be the CIP year 2024, and maybe any significant changes that might have gone on in the next year budget. I know there are a couple of shifts here and there, but before we take a kind of a final vote on that. Please.
Those extras.
Good.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee, the request before you for FY '24, I'm just going to highlight the most recent request and the budget that you are voting to approve for the FY '20 town meeting warrant. The total request for FY '24 is $2,726,220. I know when the departments came in that you vetted through while they were presenting.
That number, Eddie, I'm sorry.
$2,726,220. And the consideration for the FY '20 budget is $2,475,792 to be funded by the following. So, based upon the financial policy, the 1/10 of 2.5 that we have been, that has been compounded since the adoption of those policies, total tax levy used as an offset to the capital for FY 2020, $1,103,792. Total sewer retained earnings of $205,000, $25,000 from CIP Trust, $300,000 as a one-time payment for the replacement of the field turf at the high school, $300,000, and bond proceeds of $842,000, once again for a total of $2,475,792. I also want to draw attention to the funding sources that are recapped under the final page on the summary page by department. If you look at the total amount of bond proceeds used beyond 2020, you can see it's actually going down. It kind of stabilizes off. The actual plan was to reduce that on an annual basis, so we get that down to a zero outward of, beyond 2024, maybe 5 years. Certainly, we were a little more optimistic that we would get to that point a little sooner than this plan is providing for, but we had some costs that were really not anticipated in terms of public safety replacement of portable radios and mobile units, which require a federal mandate to change our frequency by 2023, I believe. That was kind of an unknown, and those two items alone totaled about $600,000. So that was kind of unanticipated, so it kind of put us back a little bit. That's already programmed in the CIP. That's part of the calculation going forward, but that's something that really kind of blindsided us in the past couple of years.
Okay, and if I could just add to that, another 5 years out, we'll be up close to $2 million in terms of the tax levy proceeds going towards this. So that knocks another $500,000 off of that 2029, so it's a very manageable number, assuming there aren't any other major surprises or Bill Coyle doesn't kill us with some more roadway work. Every so often, Bill. So that's good. So that's the CIP budget presented to us. Any final questions on that? If not, I'll accept a motion to accept the CIP.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for a recap on that. Okay, our next item is discussion and vote on the warrant articles. Excuse me. And I think the way I'd like to approach it this year is I would like to highlight those, I'll call them non-financial articles that we would be, for the most part, deferring to petitioner. And just in terms of moving this process along. I know a lot of these are just annual stuff we need to do anyways. So as we've gone through this, I came up with a list of items I thought would be deferred, and if there's anyone that has a disagreement on that, let's talk on that. Certainly Articles 32, 33, and 34. I think we should be deferring to the petitioner. And also, I believe Article 30 to defer. I don't know if there were any others, or I'll open that up just to comments and questions on that. Okay, there being no questions, then I'll accept a request to defer on Articles 30, 32, 33, and 34, and I'll leave it open if anyone else wants to defer any other ones as we go through this.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Great. That takes care of those. And just, I would also like to take care of first, if it's okay with everyone, Article 31. Glenn Johnson's been waiting very patiently, and I told him we'd get to him first. He just has the one article. This is Article 31. See if town meeting will vote to appropriate $23,000 from the ambulance reserve for providing cancer screenings for members of the fire rescue department. I did have a lengthy discussion with the CFO on this today. I didn't know if this was brought up last week, so I'll just open it up to questions on that or a motion on this.
Just a brief question. Chief, can you just go over this? There's been a change in legislation, correct, regarding cancer-related illnesses for firefighters. Is that what drove this a little bit, or is this, besides the obvious health concerns, but?
That didn't necessarily drive this, but it did have an effect on this. That legislation allows firefighters to obtain their benefits a lot easier if they have cancer. In the past, they have not. What drove this is there's been a giant push amongst the fire service for cancer. Firefighters coming down with cancer, they're more apt to come down with it. So thankfully, the town has been very supportive of us, the town management, finance committee, board of selectmen, and town meeting in regards to us moving forward with the cancer. We bought the second set of turnout gear. We bought the gear washer. We've changed some of our policies as far as where you can wear your gear in the station. All of that has been, we very much appreciate. And this is just the next step towards it, is having our members screened.
Just to clarify, drive was not the correct word. I selected the wrong word when I said that. But just one thing further, will this eventually be annual screen, a biannual screen? Is it something we'll see moved into an operating budget in coming years as opposed to warrant articles?
This would be something that you'd see us do into the CIP down the road, something we may do. We haven't necessarily have a time frame down, but maybe every 3 years is what we're looking at with the company.
Would that
Just-
qualify? Okay. Glenn,
Yeah, no,
cheating on public TV is terrible. I don't think it would qualify as CIP. It's certainly something that wouldn't get in the way of us looking at the next series of this by any stretch. Ed, I know you wanted to add a comment here on this.
No, it wouldn't qualify for CIP, and I didn't know the frequency of the testing until tonight. But if it is every 3 years, I think it would have to be part of the operational budget. If it's a one-time request, I can understand it being like it is now, an outside warrant article. But if there's a plan to test on every other year or a frequency of every 3 years, I think it needs to be part of the operational side of the budget.
Good question, by the way. Kim? And then Ed. No, go ahead, Kim.
How does this kind of screening differ from what you would get through your health insurance?
sure. This is a little bit more in depth. The company comes in, they're going to come into the fire station, they'll be there for 5 days. Each physical is approximately 3 hours long per person. They use ultrasounds, they ultrasound your organs, they do multiple blood tests. The testing is more in depth than what you would get through your normal health insurance.
So your health insurance wouldn't cover this kind of testing?
No, it would not unless your doctor found something was wrong with you at the time, but this is more of a preventative thing. Early detection is what the goal is here.
Is there sort of a, like, what next? So say you do the screening and then people are found with cancer, like, what would be the next step?
So the next step at that point is they are referred to go to their primary care physician and then work on whatever the situation may be. If they found a mass maybe on their liver or spleen, they would send them, say, you need to follow up with your primary care physician, have things tested, see if it's cancer, and then move on from there.
I was trying to kind of see, is there a process like determine, is it job-related versus just...
So with the fire department, cardiac and cancer are job-related, as presumed.
So that liability is with us whether they're tested or not, which is, according to what I've been told, just trying to be proactive and try for early detection, so to try to minimize that liability.
Okay, that makes sense.
Kim?
Eddie, is this being recommended by town administration? Funding for this? Is this
Yes.
included in the budget that has been submitted?
Yes.
Further, by us putting this testing process in place, will that benefit us in terms of when you go to negotiate with healthcare down the line? Can you use this and say, hey, our X number of employees are getting pre-cancer screenings every 3 years? Is there a benefit on that end in terms of...
That's a good question. I haven't thought of that, but I certainly think that would be beneficial to us by saying that we are there is a screening process to detect those individuals that may minimize the exposure in the long term on a health plan. But that's something we can explore and look into.
Maybe one more quick question. Sure. Off of Kevin's question. Is there a way of also making it before you hire a new firefighter, to kind of check, do some type of screening to see what you're taking on, if there was an issue?
That is something that we are looking at for the future. Currently, the company that we're working with is expanding into the Northeast, so their testing facilities are not really available for that yet, but that is the plan for that company in the future to move forward, and that would be something that we'd be looking at in the future. But nothing's in place yet for that.
Anything else? Okay. Do we have a...
Motion to recommend.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Yep, have a good night.
Be safe. Okay. Let's go back and I think our normal articles, I'm going to go with Articles 2 through 11 as our normal articles, and I know 12, 13, and 14 are just about normal, but what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is ask the Finance Committee if we can take Articles 2 through 11 as one, and I'm just going to paraphrase through them very quickly in terms of taking a vote, just to move this along. Do you have a motion on that? Just to recommend to take 2 through 11? We have a motion here. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. This is 2 through 11. Article 2, that's town meeting to vote to fix the salary compensation for elected town officials. I believe that would be town clerk, moderator, in the Board of Selectmen. Okay. Article 3, determine what sums of money town meeting will vote to raise and appropriate from available funds or otherwise to defray charge and expenses of the town, including debt and interest. Provide a reserve fund for the fiscal year coming up July 1, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020. Article 4 is our CIP budget that we have before you tonight. I don't believe I need to go into any more detail on that. And we sponsor it, by the way, so that should be a no-brainer. Article 5, see if town meeting vote to authorize town treasurer with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of revenue to be received during the fiscal year. Article 6, see if town meeting vote to authorize Board of Selectmen to submit applications for available state or federal funds, including Department of Elder Affairs, formerly grant funds, and I'll say et cetera after that. Article 7, see if town meeting vote to authorize Board of Selectmen to sell at public auction or by sale bid or at assessed value under special circumstances any properties in the town which town may have acquired through tax title foreclosure proceedings and assign, acknowledge, and deliver in the names and under the seal of the town deeds therefore. Article 8, see if town meeting vote to authorize the town treasurer to enter into compensatory balance agreements during fiscal year 2020 as permitted under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53F. Article 9, see if town meeting vote to establish or renew revolving funds for various town school programs under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53D, and Mass General Laws, Chapter 71. Article 10, see if town meeting vote to authorize town manager to enter into a contract or contracts with Mass Department of Transportation for the construction and maintenance of public highways for the fiscal year 2020. Do we have a motion on these articles?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. I skipped Article 11, which is, see if town meeting vote to appropriate funds, sum of money if it becomes available for transportation Chapter 90 bond issue. Motion on Article 11?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. So Articles 12, 13, and 14 are also normal articles with the dollar amounts I did want to mention. We'll take these separately. Article 12, this is to appropriate $500,000 for the OPEB Liability Trust Fund.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 13, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $185,000 from Medicaid receipts within the general fund revenues for the Auburn School Department operating budget for fiscal year 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So voted, thanks. Okay, and Article 14, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $7,864.02, which is interest earned by the Auburn High School Gym Health and Recreation Trust Fund to offset school department costs at Auburn High.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted, thank you. Article 15, we don't have a dollar amount in this.
I don't have that right now. I've reached out to the Department of Elementary and
Okay.
Secondary Education to get that out.
Okay, that's fine.
Until the town meeting.
All right. Can we just hold on? If this is the only article left, I would hate to have to meet before town meeting just for this one article. So let's hold it for the moment. Maybe we bring it back up unless we have any other holds, and then see what we want to do with this. My understanding is we may not get this number until the end of the fiscal year in June or even later, correct?
Well, I've reached out.
Yeah.
To Sullivan from the Department of Health, and she had Secretary of Education was going to get back to me
Okay.
on the number. It's usually right around 33% of what we claim as our homeless transportation. So
Okay.
Is this something we can put on the fall town meeting? Or does it have to?
You know, this revenue source, last year, we actually postponed it till the fall, thinking that the money's going to come in post-July 1. It came in before June 30th. We had to record it to the general fund. We couldn't hold it and reserve it and use it for town meeting. If this money comes in before June 30th, it has to go to the general fund. DOR will not let us hold it for a fall town meeting. So, I don't know what's going to happen this year. Last year, it was before. The 2 previous years was after.
I could most likely get you a number probably within next week or so.
Okay.
And I had this conversation because I was trying to get a number, and he had said that the board of selectmen had approved it with no number there, and that we could put it into the, when we do the town meeting, we could have the number then, but.
Okay.
So sometimes you appropriate a sum of money and approve it as is until such time leading up to town meeting that number becomes known.
Okay, and I'm guessing, but I believe we would be in favor of what money's due. And it's not a lot of money, is it? So we're, yeah.
Yeah, if it was like $600 or, yeah.
Can we do what Eddie just said?
Yeah, all right.
That's my motion.
So this would be to appropriate a sum of money, if known, from the McKinney-Vento receipts within general fund revenues to the Auburn School Department. Do I have a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. That's a big Band-Aid. Article 16, see if town meeting, actually, I believe Article 16, what we're trying to do is create the ability to go further than 3 years on a school bus contract, and that would only be to, if there's an advantage to both us in terms of cost, securing a cost, that kind of thing on it. So that's my paraphrasing on Article 16. Any questions, comments, or recommendation?
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. How did I do on that? Did okay on that? Okay. You're welcome. I'm going to read Article 17. This is a new article, correct? See if town meeting will vote to accept Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 71F pertaining to non-resident or foster care student tuition, which authorizes the Auburn Public School Department to accept and deposit with the town treasurer into a separate account such tuition payments for non-resident students and state reimbursements for foster care children when they may be which then may be expended by the school committee without further appropriations for expenses incurred in providing education for such students. Dr. Brunel pretty much basically said if there's an opportunity to bring in a student that doesn't add to the school expenses, be it a teacher, an IA, or something like that, I believe is, we need this to be approved for this Mass General Law to be able to do that.
Right.
Correct.
So we would have to set up that specific account for that, and it would be in an effort to try to keep our students in district.
Right.
By maybe offering that to another community that has a child that might benefit from that program. We would not do it, we wouldn't take in extra children and raise the cost or expand our teaching staff. It would only be if we had caught it, and it would give us some revenues to hold on to that
Right.
would pay for that program.
Right. So this would be basically if we had a chair available and enough, let's just say, hands to take care of that patient without increasing our costs. Any questions on this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think we're all aye on this. All right, great, so voted. Article 18, we've got a few CIP repurposes. This is Article 18, to repurpose CIP funds by amending Article 15 of the May 1, 2018 town meeting, Packagug Building Rehab, account ending in 581752 as follows. Authorize the amount of $127,685 to be used for purposes of removing the underground oil tank at Swanson Road Intermediate School, 10 Swanson Road.
Motion to recommend?
Second?
Any questions on this? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Thank you. Article 19, also repurpose. See if town meeting will vote to repurpose CIP funds by amending Article 4 of the May 2017 town meeting Packagug Building Rehab account. That account ending in 581840 in the amount of $193,000 as follows. First, authorize the amount of $60,000 to remain but be repurposed for Univent upgrades to Packagug. Next, authorize $55,000 to be used for purchase of a multifunction school activity bus for use by the district. And finally, authorize the amount of $78,000 to be used for purposes of removing the underground oil tank, at Swanson Road Intermediate School. Any questions on this?
Motion to approve.
Thanks, Kim. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Do we have any more school?
Yep.
Okay. Well, you got to hang around for that. This is all really exciting stuff. Article 20, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $46,000 from general fund revenues for care and maintenance of Mary D. Stone and Julia Bancroft School Building. This is the third year of this, I think.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Article 21, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $200,000 from Community Access Enterprise retained earnings for the reconstruction renovation of the Camp Gleason Meeting Hall for government meeting and community-related activities. This is sponsored by the Supervisor of Cable and Community Television.
Motion to recommend?
Just
I'm sorry.
Just a quick question. I know Chris isn't here to speak on the warrant article. He mentioned to us previously some of his ideas and thoughts. He does great work. I think it's great to restore that building and make it used for meeting space. I do have some questions as to the necessity for the kitchen component to that. I don't know that that's my personal opinion. It's not the best use of resources. So, I'm supportive of the money to get the building up and ready and handicap accessible and open to more public space. So I don't know if there'll be more questions come for town meeting members as to the details of the renovations and how much will be asked. Again, that kitchen component just adds, in my mind, adds a lot of maintenance and cleanings and just seems like you could rent a commercial kitchen somewhere for a few hours to film your show and then move on, as opposed to installing all these fixtures in this facility. But that's just my...
Julie?
I just want to add a couple things to it. So the commercial kitchen that would be used for cable would enable us to access the cable funds to build that kitchen out, so there's no cost to the taxpayer. The advantage beyond having something like that through cable television is if we use that facility for purposes where you need a kitchen, then we'll have one there and it won't cost the taxpayers. And I can just give you a couple of examples. We have some scheduling difficulties at the senior center right now, and we've had them for several years, where we have more requests for the space than we have available nights to use that space. We've tried to relocate some of those users to Town Hall, but they need a kitchen. So we don't have a kitchen that they can utilize for their programs. So there are a number of programs that we also have turned down, programs with the state, where they have brought in refreshments on certain cases, but in other cases, they need to have the preparation area, so we're not able to have any of those larger meetings here. So beyond the cable television, we foresee a use of that kitchen, which would be allowed by either renters of the facility or internal programs or any programs that we could potentially relocate from the senior center to free up space. As you know, in the senior center, we really only have that one large room with 2 smaller rooms, and because of the success of so many of the programs up there, they've all outgrown the smaller rooms. They all want the larger room, and there's only so many nights, and everyone wants the same room. So we were looking to this as an opportunity to expand the use of our senior center, relocate some programs. Same thing with the library. We have a number of programs at the library that are not necessarily library-related. They're just running out of spaces here. Look at any Monday through Thursday night, it's really difficult to get a room that's large enough, not necessarily the kitchen, but just large enough to have a meeting space. So the kitchen would be used other times than that. The meeting space would absolutely be used quite frequently. We just don't have any place to have a large meeting in the town at all.
Through the chair, that clarifies. I think when Chris first mentioned it, I had these visions of the set from Julia Childs being rolled into Camp Gleason. And
that is an option for him. He wanted to do that. I think the other piece of it is we looked at it and we talked to Bill Coyle about it. It would be nice to be able to offer maybe a cooking class through the Recreation and Culture program. It's just a different demographic, and maybe, we do have a cooking class at the senior center. We have some capital needs there with some of the equipment in the kitchen that's getting older and needs some upgrading, but perhaps we can put that off if we can use this particular equipment for things. But we did talk about potentially having some kind of program through the Recreation and Culture that maybe bring somebody in to do a cooking. I know the library has actually done that as well.
And to be
But they don't
clear
have
on
the
this, we're
facility.
using Charter's own enterprise retained earnings, which is not really taxpayer dollars, and we're also getting out of it basically a building that was in pretty shoddy shape, even though it's kept up as best as possible by DPW, and hopefully we get that whipped up into nice shape. Obviously, it's a beautiful piece of land up there.
We'll cook before the Finance Committee meetings. How's that?
We still won't get pizza on our budget, I'm sure, so we'll talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. Kim,
Motion to recommend.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Good. Article 22. This is a request to appropriate $33,000 from general funds for the purchase of a new hosted email solution for the town of Auburn. This is by the IT director, and I think Mike had sent out a one-pager on what this upgrade is to do. I think there's a lot of security upgrades that are part of this thing. Mike came in and mentioned that to us. So I'll just, any questions or a motion on this?
To recommend.
Thank you.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Article 23, see if town meeting will vote to adjust the factors for the property tax exempt. Where's our assessor? Come on up. I have such a terrible time explaining both of these articles every year. And if you can give us just a summary on it, that would be great. So this will address both Articles 23 and 24. Nice to see you. Thanks for waiting.
So these two articles, the first one is just increasing the income and the asset limits for the 41C exemptions, which are given out to our they're the highest paying ones to our lowest income seniors. The increase, by changing it, the increase is minimal. It should be able to be absorbed by the current overlay that we appropriate every year. So there's really no dollar change in what we're looking for. It just helps a few more people qualify.
Good.
And the second one, we currently double our exemptions, all of our exemptions across the board. This would apply just to the 41C exemptions, and we would add an additional 40% to the maximum that these people can get up to. They don't automatically get the 40%, it just acts as an inflation rider for a few more years until their taxes reach that threshold.
Questions on that?
Motion to recommend Articles 23 and 24.
Thank you, Kim. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted.
Thank you.
Sorry to keep you. Good to see you. All right, Article 25, see if town meeting vote to appropriate $53,000 from overlay surplus for miscellaneous building facility improvements. This is including remodel first floor bathrooms, town hall, the DPW building, town hall record management upgrade, which I think was mentioned to us earlier by Ed in the contingency. The biggest dollar amount is the remodel, that's 18,000, sorry, the town hall records management upgrade is 20, the bathroom remodel is $18,000. This is from the DPW director. Questions or recommendation?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Article 26, see if town meeting will vote to authorize borrowing $1.2 million to fund non-participating roadway enhancements and right-of-way costs associated with the Mass DOT Auburn Street reconstruction project. Any questions on this? DPW Director Bill Coyle is here. Bill? Thanks for your patience, too. Kev, you had a question? Did I see that?
Yes, just relative to what the project is and where our costs relative to the DOT's project would be.
Sure. Through the chair, members of the Finance Committee, this project I've been working on for a number of years now. It's actually a $3.4 million project to reconstruct Auburn Street by Mass DOT. It's 80% federally funded, 20% state. The project extends from Walsh Avenue to Brotherton Way, includes reconstructing the roadway, the sidewalks, the bridge railing, also new traffic signals at Brotherton Way, and upgrade to the pedestrian signals at Route 12 and Auburn Street. So as part of this $3.4 million project, the Mass DOT and the federal government will participate in most of the cost, but what they won't participate in is the some of the improvements with the streetscaping and also ornamental lighting. However, they will pay for the underground utilities for the ornamental street lighting, which is about $500,000. So the $1.2 million will cover our portion of that, which is about $500,000. So the feds in the state will pay for about $500,000. We'll have to pay for the actual signal posts themselves in the lighting units. And then in addition, we've had a landscape architect working on this project as well. So there's also streetscaping, ornamental trees, park benches, trash receptacles, brick feature strips along the sidewalks. So we're really trying to improve the entire corridor coming from the interstate into Auburn. And I think eventually we'd like to continue with some of the improvements on Brotherton Way, probably separately from this project. So this project funding is on what's called the 2021 TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, which means it's eligible for funding in October of 2020. So we will be ready to advertise for construction in the fall of 2020, with construction anticipated to start about 2 years from now. The roadway's in rough shape. We're trying to put a Band-Aid on some of the areas to hold it together for the next couple of years. So again, the $1.2 million consists of about $900,000 in what we call non-participating costs, because the feds in the state will not pay for, and then $300,000 we're anticipating for appraisals for some of the right-of-way costs and easements. What we call sliver takings, not major takings, but with some of the bicycle accommodations and additional sidewalks and retaining walls, we do need to access some of the private properties. So there'll be sliver takings. So be happy to answer any questions. I try to give as much information. Oh, one other thing that's important to note is the Mass DOT, the plans are at the 25% design level. We were anticipating a public hearing tentatively scheduled for April 11th. However, that was put off, probably we're looking at maybe sometime in June now. So because of that, we've asked our consultant to come in and hold a public informational meeting. That meeting is scheduled for May 1st, and notices are going to be mailed out to all the town meeting members, and I believe also email notifications. They should be receiving, I believe, the email later this week or beginning of next week.
Also to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen.
So again, that meeting will be May 1st. So be happy to answer any of the questions you might have.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in with one thing. Bill did a great job explaining this. This did come about several years ago when we were talking about the Auburn Street project and how do we enhance Drury Square as a more identifiable downtown area. It has been raised, and it is already in written plans that we had approved that went through several public hearings, including the Drury Square Vision Plan. This is a big part of that. It was part of the Economic Development Strategic Plan that also had several public hearings and was approved. And it's also in the currently drafting of the master plan. So there have been several public hearings that led to us coming up with the strategies for Drury Square, where it was agreed that we need to put some work into it. We've received several grants, and we just recently received a grant for $15,000 from the state for wayfinding and signage, which will also tie into this, because that will give us kind of the design look that we're trying to accomplish with the signage and the design. And as Bill said, we're trying to, look at a little bit more ornamental streetlights where you can put flags and banners and some plantings, and it will really help enhance the area as a downtown, hopefully help encourage economic development in that area, and it's in concert with all of these plans, as well as the Drury Square Vision bylaw that you see on this warrant this evening as well. So it's all kind of tied in together, but just so you know the history of it, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but the aspects of this went through several public hearings.
Julie, can you confirm that this article, though, is not contingent on approval, Article 32, or those related to?
Correct. No, good question,
Just to be
Mr. Chair.
clear.
Totally separate. One is a bylaw to enhance and encourage development in the Drury Square area, and this is to also enhance that, but this is not a bylaw.
Okay, just so everybody's clear on that. Any other questions on this? Or motion?
Well, I'm sorry, I'll add one more thing.
Sure.
I know you didn't ask the question, but the $1.2 million, while we need to have the approval of it, now, that would not all be expended in one fiscal year. It would be shared out over 2 fiscal years. The appraisals would come first, then some of the other work would come first, but because of the construction schedule, it actually would be spread out from a bonding perspective over 2 years.
Okay. Kevin was going to ask that question. I know.
Right on the tip of my tongue.
Karnak,
I thought so.
A motion on this.
Motion.
To approve? And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Article 27. Thanks, Bill. See if town meeting vote to authorize $2.2 million to borrow to install an emergency force main bypass under Route 20 to serve it as emergency means of pumping wastewater from the Pinrock Road pump station to the Upper Blackstone treatment plant. I believe this has been discussed at length by Jeff Mitchell, and I think certainly last week a lot of numbers were thrown around on this. Any further questions on that?
Just a brief question, and my questions have been answered, and I can appreciate that we're getting ahead of problems and getting, stop being reactionary when it comes to this stuff, but is this part of a larger plan? Is this done based on consultants as far as what our system should look like? How are we coming up with that this is the priority here, other than your, many years of expertise in the area?
It's more being proactive. It's not necessarily something that we brought in consultants to view the entire system and say, this is what we need to do. This is something that's been on our minds for quite a few years now, that if something did happen to this force main because of the way it crosses, Route 20, and it's 4 lanes, 5 lanes of Route 20 plus Greenwood Street and whatnot, it would be astronomical cost-wise, as well as interruptions to traffic and whatnot. So we did bring in consultants in order to get the cost, the construction cost estimate nailed down to this appropriation. But as far as somebody coming in and saying that we should be doing this, it's no. That's to answer that question. No, there wasn't somebody that told us. We decided that being proactive was a better way to approach this.
And do you foresee any, either through yourself or consultants, an overview of the system to see where we stand in terms of, will we come back in 2 years or 5 years looking for other, bigger improvements?
All of that is currently in the works. We have actually I don't know if it's the next article or the article after that, is the 200,000 for an I&I work, which is part of the overall system to continue looking for infiltration and inflow, groundwater coming into the system. And so that's part of a DEP, kind of a segue into that section. That's a DEP mandate that we have to do. So that will be the start of a system-wide inspection process.
Thank you.
My understanding, Jeff, is there's also a restriction on a time frame when you can basically rip up Route 20?
Possibly. As you all probably know, there's been quite a bit of construction down there recently. There's a new water line that was put in, as well as a sewer line from the town of Shrewsbury that was put in. So we're not sure of when they're going to do the final paving. And if we don't get in place before that, prior to that, there'll be a 5-year moratorium on digging in the street.
Kim, you got a question?
How does this 2.2 million fall in the our 2.5?
So this would be built into the sewer rate consideration? So I don't know if that has been done yet, but certainly based upon the borrowing need and the length of construction in the term of the bond, because you can go out for 30 years, they're going to have to build it into the sewer rates.
Okay, so this wouldn't require...
This is not part of 2.5.
Gotcha. That's what I was...
It's coming out of the sewer enterprise fund through fee.
Sewer rates. Sewer rates. Right, okay. Which could be additionally impacted by any negative findings on the next article, which we'll get to in a second. Any other questions on Article 27?
Motion to recommend?
Oh, second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Article 28, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $220,000 to be funded through sewer retained earnings to perform flow monitoring to comply with DEP's 314 CMR 12.04 operations, infiltration, and inflow analysis. As Jeff had mentioned, this is basically, we'll be getting some eyes into the pipes, et cetera, right? Yes. Just to see the status and any weak spots we may have.
We had previously performed an I&I study, as well as a rehab project. It was a little over $1 million that we spent rehabbing the system, but since then, we've found other issues just through our own flow meters within the stations and our assessment to the Upper Blackstone. We've noticed that the flows are going back up. So I was in the process of looking at this, and then we get the letters from DEP saying that it's mandated this year. So it just helped prod us along a little bit quicker.
Will this 220 take care of looking at all of our system that we can look at?
Well, we're in the process right now of, we have a consultant in place that is looking at the entire system, and they're reviewing our flows that we have from the pump stations right now and other sources. And what they're going to do through DEP's guidance, their program, is to limit it to certain areas within our system that we're going to actually put flow meters in. We have to put 22 flow meters within the system during wet weather in order to see, so that, we get a rainstorm within the period. It's like 10, I forget how many, a couple months, I think it is. So that if we get a rainstorm or some type of, snow melt or whatnot during that period of time, the gauges will show that, and then those will be the target areas that we'll actually go back, do full inspection on, and then decide, what capital needs to be performed.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, so voted, thank you. And Article 29, to see if town meeting will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to submit legislation to amend the acts of 1963, Chapter 708.
A little outdated.
I believe I got a summary from the CFO. Basically, it's going to save some costs in terms of, is it advertising in terms of certain
That's true. Right
stuff that's
now, in
going
order
on?
for us to, the way it's written now, and it wasn't a big deal in 1963, the way it's written, that any modifications or amendments or changes or additions we make to the regulations that the sewer commissioners have, we have to actually advertise them in the legal ads, which means we have to write out the old regulation, the proposed amendment, and, we're talking doubling the size of the Auburn News, and we'd have a line item probably larger than some of the budgets in town if we if we were to do that. So that's why we're proposing the legislative change.
I'm assuming we're not the first town to be trying to change that, right? Or is this just process? Yeah, okay.
Chair, to the town manager, isn't there other legislation with other things in terms of job postings, and wasn't there something else out being proposed to the legislature to, because everybody's in that same boat, having to post positions in the newspaper for X amount of, and...
Yeah, through the chair, you're correct. There was a municipal modernization bill a couple of years ago that did make some changes, and there's going to be a municipal modernization 2 bill coming out where that might be in that. I think my understanding is from town council that because the sewer commission was set up under the acts of Chapter 708, that those other changes can't apply to us unless we legislatively change the Enabling Act. So this would be the Enabling Act.
So I must have missed a meeting somewhere where we discussed this stuff. So the acts of 1963-708, that's the enabling legislation that created the sewer
That's correct.
department in Auburn?
Yes.
And what is the legislation that you want to submit? Because it doesn't say what the legislation is here, so...
Through the chair, I believe, and I'll double check, but I believe town council right now is working on the draft, and he said he would have the marked up version so we can see what Chapter 6, what the initial chapter looks like, and what the proposed changes are under
will
track
that go to
changes,
town
and it will
meeting
go into the
as the
package.
article?
Yes. Well, it will go in as the attachment to the article, correct.
So will town meeting members at the, because this is so vague, this article, the way it's
There's going to be a separate mailing with the warrant, as I understand it.
With the actual proposed changes from town council.
Because the way I read this, as a town meeting member, I don't feel like I would be notified of what's being changed. And there are rules about, because the only thing that gets posted at the different places in town is this warrant. It's not going to post all that stuff. So citizens would not be notified what is being amended.
I don't know.
Yeah. I see your point. My understanding from town council was that it would be included in the warrant when we mailed the warrant out to town meeting members. So if it's being mailed in the warrant, then it would also be posted when the warrant is posted.
I just think that you might get in trouble if you don't have enough information here for, because the way I look at this, as a town meeting member, I'd say I was not notified. I was not sufficiently informed of what I'm expected to vote on. This article is way broader than, how you can only vote on what...
We'll double check with town council and make sure that it's okay. My understanding was it was going to be done by the time we mailed this out, so it would be included in the warrant as an attachment. I guess you could put the whole thing in here, but...
The time would be
Right.
restricted for printing.
unless you
Right.
have it by
Right.
next week sometime.
We'll double check with him.
That's what you do for a bylaw amendment, you have to do the whole thing.
Well, as a finance committee, we still can take a vote on this
Yeah, no,
exclusive, right, and your point is well taken. We have an unknown here, and it was in terms of how this is going to be fully presented, actually to town residents, really, because town meeting members are representing the town residents, so they can talk.
We'll check
on
with
that.
town council
Okay.
tomorrow. We did discuss it with him.
That's a great point. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we'll check, because it's a good point. But my understanding is it will be part of the warrant that is
Okay.
both mailed and posted.
but my question still is, what exactly are you amending?
Do you mean like what sections?
It's language within, within the Enabling Act itself
Right, but to accomplish what?
to bring the language up to date, modernization, such as what the manager said. Right now, it says that we have to advertise it in a newspaper. So now what we want to do is make hard copies available, in certain locations within the town, have it available on the website to view for a period of time and that type of thing. Because
Is there
we-
anything any more substantial than that?
Through the chair, I believe town council is looking at, there was some language in there about reporting responsibilities, which it does not coincide with the town charter as amended in May of 2009. So I think some language has to be in there with regard to the authority that the charter gives versus what the Enabling Acts gave 65 years before that amendment happened. So I believe he was looking at that at the same time, thinking that if we're going in to amend the language on the notification and postings, that we should be amending any language to make it consistent with the town charter.
Comfortable with that?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
even if, I'd prefer to recommend, but even if we deferred on this, I'm comfortable with it. As a deferral is obviously cost savings on this, but if we can take a vote on it, so. Do we have a recommendation on this?
Defer to the petitioner?
If we want or recommend. I think we have enough information, so we have a deferral recommendation and a second on this. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. So we'll defer on this, Jeff, for good reason on that. I think that's the last article. Did we defer already on Article 30? Yeah, okay. That was an easement move. Okay, that's good. So that's all the articles. Jeff, all of you, thanks for your time tonight.
So we are done? We don't have anything until town meeting?
We have nothing until town meeting. I guess the only other thing that may come up would be some significant transfer that needed to be addressed, but at this point, we don't have to meet before town meeting on that. And that's what, 7 PM on May 7th, Sharon?
7 PM, May 7th.
Okay, that's fine. We don't have any minutes that I'm aware of. Unless there's anything else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn then.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Good night.